Right now, somewhere outside your window, a squirrel is doing something you have never seen. And the fact that you have never seen it is exactly the point. Most people assume that when the sun goes down, the backyard goes quiet. The birds disappear, the insects slow down, and the squirrels, those small, hyperactive creatures that spent the entire day chasing each other across your fence and burying things in your lawn, simply stop. Go somewhere. Disappear until morning. But that assumption is wrong. And what actually happens to your squirrels at night is one of the most fascinating and surprisingly emotional stories in the natural world. You have watched them for months, maybe years. You know their routines. You know which one is bolder, which one always steals from the feeder first, which one sits on the same branch every single morning like it owns the place. But you have never seen what happens the moment darkness falls. You have never seen where they go, what they feel, how they survive, or what they are actually doing while you sleep. Until now. Stay with this until the end, because what you are about to discover is going to completely change the way you look at your backyard tomorrow morning. The squirrels you think you know have an entire hidden life that unfolds every single night, and once you understand it, you will never see them the same way again. Let's start with the most basic question, the one that almost nobody thinks to ask. Where does a squirrel actually go when it gets dark? The answer depends entirely on the time of year, the temperature outside, and something that scientists have only recently begun to fully understand: the social architecture of squirrel communities. Because squirrels, as it turns out, are not the solitary, every-animal-for-itself creatures that most people assume they are. They have relationships. They have preferences. And at night, those relationships become the difference between life and death. During the warmer months, a healthy adult squirrel will retreat to what researchers call a dray. This is the nest you have probably seen high in the branches of a tree, that loose, messy-looking ball of leaves and twigs that you might have dismissed as a pile of debris caught in a fork of branches. But a dray is not random. It is engineered. A squirrel constructs it with specific layers: an outer shell of large twigs and leaves for structural integrity, a middle layer of finer materials for insulation, and an inner lining of soft grasses, moss, fur, and sometimes materials they have collected from your yard, fabric scraps, plant fibers, even feathers from birds that visit the same space. The construction of a dray can take a squirrel anywhere from a few days to several weeks, depending on the availability of materials and the urgency of the situation. And here is something that will make you look at your backyard differently. That squirrel is not just randomly gathering leaves. It is making decisions. It is evaluating materials. It is returning to specific sources it has already identified as useful. Your yard, if you have the right kinds of trees and ground cover, is likely part of its supply chain. But where it gets truly interesting is what happens inside the dray when the temperature drops. Gray squirrels, the most common backyard species across North America and much of Europe, do not hibernate. This is a fact that surprises many people. Unlike groundhogs or certain species of ground squirrels that enter a deep torpor during winter, gray squirrels remain active and physiologically alert throughout the cold months. But they do something that, in many ways, is more remarkable than hibernation. They share warmth. Multiple squirrels, sometimes 3, 4, or even 5 individuals, will occupy the same dray on cold nights, huddling together to conserve body heat. And here is the detail that researchers find most extraordinary. The squirrels that share a nest are not always from the same litter. They are not always siblings. They are sometimes individuals that have built relationships over months of proximity, shared feeding spots, and what scientists describe as repeated neutral or positive interactions. In other words, squirrels choose their nighttime companions in ways that go beyond pure biology. Studies conducted by animal behaviorists at the University of Exeter found that gray squirrels exhibit a measurable degree of social tolerance, particularly during winter months, that does not appear to be purely kin-based. Squirrels that had been observed interacting peacefully at feeders during the day were more likely to share sleeping arrangements at night. The social fabric of your backyard, the hierarchy you watch play out every morning, extends into the darkness in ways that are only beginning to be understood. Now consider what this means for the squirrels you see every day. That bold one that always gets to the feeder first. That smaller one that always waits at the edge. The one that seems to follow the others around. They are not just competing for food. They are navigating a complex social world. And at night, when they squeeze into a dray together for warmth, that social world becomes intimate in a way that would astonish most people who think of squirrels as simple backyard visitors. But the nighttime life of a squirrel is not only about where it sleeps. It is also about what it remembers. Squirrels bury food. This is one of the most well-known facts about them, and yet the depth of what is actually happening when a squirrel buries a nut is almost never fully appreciated. A single gray squirrel will cache thousands of food items every autumn. Thousands. Spread across a territory that can span several acres. And research has shown, consistently and across multiple studies, that squirrels remember the locations of a significant percentage of those caches, not by smell alone, as was once believed, but through a form of spatial memory that is genuinely sophisticated. At night, when the yard is quiet and the pressure of competition is lower, squirrels engage in what researchers call cache review behavior. They revisit sites. They check on buried items. They sometimes move food from one location to another based on assessments of security and risk. A cache that was appropriate in September may become vulnerable by November if leaves have fallen and exposed the hiding spot, or if a rival squirrel has been seen in the area. The squirrel tracks this. It updates its mental map. It makes decisions. This happens largely at dusk and in the early hours after dark, which is one of the reasons you may have occasionally noticed a squirrel moving through your yard in low light conditions and wondered what on earth it was doing. It was working. Managing its resources. Operating with a level of cognitive engagement that we are only beginning to fully credit in animals of its size. There is another dimension to the nighttime life of squirrels that almost never gets discussed, and it involves something most backyard observers never even think to consider: the soundscape. Squirrels are not silent at night. They produce a range of vocalizations that serve specific purposes, and many of these occur during the transitional hours of dusk and early night. The alarm call, that sharp, repetitive bark that you have almost certainly heard during the day, does not stop when the sun goes down. It continues. And in the dark, it carries different information, because the acoustic environment changes when background noise from birds and insects diminishes. Researchers studying squirrel communication have found that the alarm calls of gray squirrels carry information about the type, direction, and even the aerial versus terrestrial nature of a perceived threat. A hawk approaching from above generates a different vocalization than a fox moving along the ground. And other squirrels respond to these distinctions in real time, adjusting their behavior accordingly. At night, when visibility is reduced and the dangers shift, owls replace hawks, foxes and raccoons become more active. This acoustic system becomes more critical, not less. If you have ever sat outside at dusk and heard an unusual sound coming from a tree that you could not quite identify, there is a reasonable chance it was a squirrel. Processing information. Communicating with others. Doing what it has been doing for millions of years in the dark. And then there is the cold. On nights when the temperature drops significantly, particularly in winter, the physiology of a squirrel enters a state that researchers describe as regulated hypothermia, though the term can be misleading if taken out of context. A squirrel does not enter the deep, metabolic shutdown of true hibernation. But it does allow its core body temperature to drop slightly below its active daytime level. Its heart rate decreases. Its breathing slows. It enters a state of rest that is deeper than ordinary sleep, but not as profound as dormancy. And in this state, bundled with one or more companions in a carefully constructed nest lined with insulating materials, it waits for morning. The fact that it survives winter at all is a testament to months of preparation that you may have been watching without fully understanding. Every nut buried in your lawn, every seed cached beneath the roots of your garden plants, every item carried away from your feeder to be stored elsewhere, all of it was part of a survival strategy being executed with a level of precision that most people never attribute to an animal the size of their hand. There is one more thing that happens at night that I want you to know about, because it is perhaps the most surprising of all. Squirrels dream. This is not a metaphor. It is not anthropomorphization. It is a finding from sleep research conducted on rodents that has been replicated across multiple studies. During the deeper phases of their nightly rest, squirrels exhibit brain activity patterns consistent with what is observed in humans during REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming. And the content of those neural patterns, as far as researchers have been able to interpret them through electrode monitoring, appears to involve the replay of spatial sequences, routes, paths, the layout of a territory. In one widely cited study, researchers found that the brain activity of sleeping rats during REM periods closely mirrored the activity patterns recorded when those same animals navigated a maze while awake. The animals were, in effect, rehearsing the maze in their sleep. Scientists believe the same process occurs in squirrels, and that it serves a function in consolidating spatial memory, reinforcing the mental maps of food caches, territory boundaries, and safe routes through the environment. Your squirrel, sleeping in its nest tonight, may be dreaming of your yard, running its routes, checking its caches, reinforcing the map that keeps it alive. That thought alone, that the small animal you have been watching from your kitchen window has an interior life complex enough to generate something resembling dreams, is worth sitting with for a moment. Because this is what so much of our relationship with backyard wildlife misses. We see the surface. We see the movement during daylight hours, the competition at the feeder, the acrobatic leaps between branches. And we assume that what we are not seeing is simply absence. Stillness. Nothing. But the night your squirrel disappears into is not empty. It is full. It is full of warmth shared between individuals who have built something resembling trust over months of proximity. It is full of cognitive work, memory being processed, maps being updated, survival being calculated. It is full of a physiology perfectly tuned by evolution to endure conditions that would be lethal to an animal unprepared for them. The squirrels in your yard are not simpler versions of more impressive animals. They are fully realized creatures, living fully realized lives, most of which happen beyond your sight and beyond your hours. Tomorrow morning, when the first one appears on your fence or at your feeder, before the day has fully begun and the light is still low and golden, look at it a little differently. It has been awake before you. It has already checked its caches. It has already navigated the territory you share. It already knows more about your yard than you probably ever will. If this changed the way you think about the animals that live alongside you, share this with someone who has a backyard and has never thought to wonder what happens after dark. And if you want to keep going deeper into the hidden lives of the creatures right outside your window, subscribe, because there is so much more that nobody is telling you. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever noticed your squirrels moving around at dusk or later than expected? I would genuinely love to know what you have seen.